and think about the national panic that would be. So I think the government knows a couple things. There's nothing we can do about it until something happens.
Hmm.
Because what do you do about it? You can't go and with something like this, you can't go and again, I guess we would have to have a better understanding of how these things spread in the first place. I'm just
Yeah.
assuming it's super dry, everything is super close together. The way that these houses were built at some point in time make it easy, additionally, make it easy for them, for the whole city to be taken. But it's the same thing with New York. People don't realize this. New York is a tiny island. New York is not a
Yeah.
big island, right? So
Right.
when New York floods, and all of this stuff, no one says I'm moving out of New York because I never want to deal with this ever again, right? Um, but New York is, in my opinion, is one of the places where these natural disaster movies, they've kind of been telling us for a long time that crap is going to go down in New York, right? Crap is going to go down in LA. I just don't think that the government can do anything about it, Are we now going to say, hey, look, these houses should not be built so close together?
Well, I
Who has
don't
to
know.
know?
I think with LA, I think so. With LA, I think the issue is, in my opinion, again, I don't, and again, we'll find out more as far as investigation. I'm not an LA expert. I think the issue in LA is that, from what I understand, they have a lot of brush that's not cleaned up a lot of
Hmm.
times. Two, I think they have a huge homeless population. If I had to guess,
Hmm.
I think somebody with a gripe started the fire. That's two.
I know they caught a
Three.
woman. They caught a woman that started one
Oh,
of the
they did.
fires.
That's what I heard. I
That
heard they
one of
had
the fires,
arrested
yeah.
somebody. And then three, I think the other thing is because they have those Santa Ana winds. So, a fire, we have the natural elements, but you have a certain combination of things that have to happen to create devastation. So fire in and of itself is bad, but if you have the winds to make it what it is, so I don't have the answers, but I think that it's not so much the houses being close, but you do have the issue of what the fires are started on and then the potential for these winds. Because what they
I think it
have
won't
right
amount
now is
to
they have
the,
these
the houses
hurricane
being
winds.
close, right? If my house
What?
burns to the ground by itself because the houses are too far away, right? I think that that's one of those types of easements. Well, I'll tell you this: when it comes to city planning, there's so much that 50 years ago, 100 years ago, city planners could not predict. They could not
Right.
predict how many cars would be on the road, right? Which is why we have so many crazy traffic issues. They could not predict these fires being as insane as they are,
Right.
because, once you need to produce and provide housing and you need to make it dense and people need to live on top of each other, there's risks associated with that. So there's a lot of things that you cannot predict. So now that it's set in stone, what do you do?
I mean, I don't know. I think that maybe I'm just throwing stuff out there. Maybe they have to build with more fire resistant materials because
But
they.
but that would only work for new properties. You can't if they're not going to insist that Dawn, who owns a super old house that will catch on fire like that, right? And also, if it's windy enough, my neighbor's house will, unless you are ready to. And again, California is heavily regulated, and a lot of Californians hate the regulation for so many reasons. So there's things
Mhm.
that you can do to predict new builds. There's things that you can do to predict when someone is buying and selling, right? To prevent certain things, like having certain requirements. But if I'm sitting there in my house for 50 years and I'm not selling or buying or doing anything, you're going to have to come to me and say, hey, we're going to have to redo the sides of your house. Like,
Well, that's not going to happen. But
right?
as far as these neighborhoods, they're gone. So I think
Yeah.
going.
Oh, yeah.
You know
Moving
what I'm saying?
forward.
They'll
Yeah.
they'll have to further rebuild. And again, I don't know. I'm not a environmental engineer in any form of the fashion. But for the new builds, I don't know if it'll be fire resistant stuff. I don't know if there's more water infrastructure to battle stuff because from what I understand, even with they said in the Palisades, which is where a lot of this happened. They said the water tanks were empty or they weren't as full as they should have been, and then a lot of the fire hydrants, a lot of the hydrants didn't have the water. They were running out of water. But
Hmm.
from what I understand,
I was going to
tanks
say,
even if the
if the
tanks
water
were
was there,
full
could they have prevented
and the
this?
water was there, even firefighters were like, even if we had, because they got on Karen Bass, the mayor,
Yeah.
because she cut funding to the fire department last year and put more into the police. But from what
I
I
heard she
read,
added $50 million in funding, actually. I heard it was the opposite.
I heard that she took some. It was like 20% cut, and they added more to police.
Hmm.
But from what I read, even if you had two
Yeah,
times the firefighters, it wasn't going to stop this natural disaster. So to your point, there are certain things that happen, like you said with Hurricane Sandy.
yeah.
It's about where you're building, and you're absolutely right. I think that's something that they'll have to consider too, because as men, sometimes as mankind, we can be arrogant and say, we're going to do it anyway,
We're
or we,
forgetful and we're arrogant.
yeah,
You see LBI now, these people are acting like this never happened and it could never happen again.
crazy,
And I'm like, and you could see when you're in LBI, you can see the bay and you can see that's how thin LBI is. But
yeah,
people are still investing millions of dollars because that's how much those houses cost on LBI.
right, right,
Millions and millions of dollars, right?
yeah,
On this tiny little island. If you're telling me, the water levels are rising, if you're telling me not to build here, that's major. The US government is never going to say don't move to LA. The government
well,
is never going to say
no,
don't live here, right?
you're absolutely right. They're not going to do that. And the other thing too is that insurance costs. So what's
Oh,
happened with insurance in northern LA? Now this is before these fires happened in northern LA. Companies like State Farm have totally stopped insuring.
as
They
they
just
should,
stopped insuring
as they should.
huge parts. Same thing in Florida. So because of the hurricanes and wildfires, certain insurance companies at first they were jacking the prices up, and at a certain point they're like, "No, we're not gonna cover
As they
certain
should,
things."
but we don't listen because we like to blame insurance companies, big businesses for everything. And listen, there's plenty of blame for that they should, have. But on something
Yeah,
like this, if I'm an insurance company and I know that
yeah,
you want to build a house in a volcano, I'm not
right,
insuring you.
right,
You know what I
exactly.
mean? Like it doesn't
Yeah,
make sense. So insurance is not is not, insurance is not FEMA. It's not a government agent. They're there to make money. Now, a case
right.
can be made that they make way too much freaking money. But I would rather have insurance than not have insurance. And if an
Yeah,
insurance company is telling me that I will not insure you a property in this town, I'm going to listen because they're the ones evaluating the list better than anybody else could. So,
yeah,
I know we like to beat up on insurance companies, and I've seen a lot of that on social media. I think that they do a lot of shady things. But listen, like people have to take some responsibility for what is happening out there.
yeah,
The federal government and insurance company are not your mom and dad, right? They're not. We have to have some kind of responsibility in saying, "Oh yeah, we knew." There's certain things that we just know. The people in LBI, if God forbid something was to happen where another natural disaster were to take place in LBI and all the homes will be, no one can say, oh, we didn't know that could possibly happen. But we
yeah,
love to blame the government. We love to blame insurance companies. We love to blame big business. And my whole thing is, yes, they do a lot of stuff that's blameworthy. But something like this, for you to say, hey, I'm not going to insure, a house on top of a freaking, in a cave
right,
somewhere.
right, right,
Okay, that tells me
right,
something, right?
right,
That tells me maybe
right.
that's not the investment that I need to
Maybe
be
that's not where
making.
I need to be.
Right. So I think that we all have to
Yeah,
kind of put our big boy pants on. It's just, this is certainly not the time, right? For blame, because there's a lot of devastation and a lot of pain out there. And these insurance company do not have the capacity to make everybody whole. This is what
no, you
people
know
also
what?
don't
I'm
understand.
so glad you said that, because that in and of itself is so. It's the point. There's this idea that insurance companies just have this endless. They have a lot of money, but like you said, the insurance model. And again,
Yes.
there's plenty of blame to go around, but insurance model is to collect and pay out as little as possible.
Yes.
Now, in certain cases they do have to pay out, but they insurance companies manage risk, like you said, better than anybody else, because
Hmm.
their whole thing is about how much am I collecting versus how much I'm going to have to pay out, and they have to understand that risk, because if they get that risk wrong, it
Yeah.
only takes one disaster and they're out of business
Yep.
because they can't cover it. They absolutely
They
can't.
just can't do
And
it.
and like you said, to the point, if an insurance company says I'm not insuring a certain region anymore, they've already, then you should, to me, you
Let's
should
think
be
about this
shook.
a little bit. And again, it will be one thing if one insurance company says, you know what, this area is too rich for my blood. But if
Yeah.
if the place is completely uninsurable at all, maybe you listen to that, and maybe there's just one insurance company that'll cover you, maybe just the one insurance company. Worry about that a little bit, right? And I get it,
Yeah.
like if you're already in your home and these things are happening, there's not a lot you can do about that.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think that insurance companies, should at the very least, before they tell you no, say, look, these are the things that you can retrofit in your house right now that will lower the risk and yes, will insure you.